Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It's Dr. Phil here, and I would love to talk to you about birds and opals, but I've got a more serious topic, and I'm so sorry about this, but we've got to talk about the war in Ukraine. And more recently, there was an incident in which a couple of planes were shot down. And I think that we should actually investigate these kinds of things. We shouldn't stick our heads in the sand. We should have a look through the lies and the propaganda and see if we can ascertain for ourselves what's actually gone on. And I would suggest that with the information that's available, a lot of the time we can do it. So let's get on with this and see what we can do. All right, what's all this about anyway? I'm just pointing out that I'm an amateur at all of this. I'm only an enthusiast in aviation. I am certainly not an expert. So take that with as many grains of salt as you need to, but I would suggest that you can actually get something out of this. I think we can determine something, if not conclusive evidence, some pretty good evidence as to what actually happened. So we'll go basically through the facts really, really quickly. On Sunday, the 14th of the 1st, 2024, 2 aircraft fell from the sky, and then the fun began, didn't it? These were identified as an A50 and an IL-22. The A50 is this big thing with a radar dish on it. The IL-22 is a propeller-driven plane. That's all you need to worry about. I didn't know what they were called either, but they're called AWACS, Airborne Radar Control. They're radar planes, and they're really important for the military. More important than you would expect, because what they do is that they can control the battlefield. Instead of having to look around yourself for the enemy, they can actually tell you where they are. It's called vectoring. You tell the pilots of the planes where the enemy is, they can go and shoot them down. It's a great advantage, and Ukraine don't have any of these planes. So it's really important. It's a massive, massive loss to them. Now, Ukraine presumably have got a massive hole that they can exploit. So they can get their Frogfoot, that's the Sukhoi 25, or they can get their MiG-29. They could even probably get a Sopwith Camel in there now. No radar. What can you do? Anywho, moving on. And also for Russia, it's embarrassing. Now, quite frankly, in a NATO country, we would say fair and square if the enemy got us. But in Russia, they were trying to sell this narrative that Ukraine aren't a threat anymore. So that's kind of put paid to that, hasn't it? So anyway, we've got to move on. Ukraine say that they haven't, well, they don't say much anyway, but eventually the military, when pressed, did claim the kill. So that's the story. The Russians say the Russians shot it down. The Ukrainians say that they shot it down. So who's right? Can we use the commonly available evidence to determine who actually made the shot? And what kind of info would we need? Well, probably you just need a little bit of information. Maybe some information on the missile. A cutaway would be nice. And maybe an example of the damage created. Do we have any of this? Well, unfortunately, yeah, we do. MH117, a civilian airliner that was shot down in 2014. I'm going to labour this point just a little bit, just to point something out. 2014. We think the war began in 2022. Began in 2014. The other thing that we need to know about it is it wasn't an insurgency, it wasn't an uprising, because the people who actually did the insurgency ultimately got this medal here. This medal. They were military service people. These were people who are part of the military. In other words, it was a full-scale invasion, right from the get-go. Illegal, disgusting. That's what it was. It's never been anything different. So if you're trying to sit on the fence on this, no, it's an illegal war. You got that? Imagine the USA attacking Canada. Imagine Australia attacking New Zealand. It's just ridiculous. We wouldn't do it because we're civilized. Anywho, we shouldn't forget about the MH117, and it's proved itself to be useful. Sorry to be a bit macabre about this. We're having a look at the fragmentation pattern that happened on the fuselage of the MH117. So you can see, sorry to say this, it popped like a balloon. So we don't know some of the fragmentation, but from a generalized look at the thing, you can see that it's not that much, really. Very sparse fragmentation pattern. Is that true of all Buk missiles? I don't know. But it's interesting to note anyway, because when you look in the other side of the fence, the Patriot missile, we've got information from the Gulf War, which is in the 90s, and in other words, grainy footage. There is a paper that was written by Lewis and Postol. They did an analysis of the Gulf War. In case you're interested, they decided that about 60% of the Patriot missiles hit. They also gave some really grainy images, and if you zoom in on these images, they're no better. It's just, if you squint your eyes and you squint your brain a bit, you can see a dense dispersion pattern by the Patriot missiles. That's the best I can do for you. I'm sorry. And I accept that that is a very long bow to draw. So let's have a look at the damage. This is the IL-22. It's astonishing, quite frankly. I'll walk you through some of the damage, but first we'll go through what I've actually done here. I divided into 4 sections. You will notice the sections are not equal, just so that you know. This section here is quite a small bit. This section here is a larger bit, but perspective may be involved here. We don't know. This is a small bit, this is a large bit. But basically what you can see here is that in the front and on the top really is where most of the dispersion happens. According to my count, feel free to count it yourself. If you've got a different story, I'd love to hear it. But the dispersion tells me that it was, on top and in front of this section here that the explosion happened. That's basically where we can go. And as a bit of a side note, from my counting, 381 holes. That's an astonishing number of holes. How did that thing stay in the air? As far as I know, that thing there and these 3 things here, these are trim tabs. They're more important than they look. These are the things that mean that the pilots can actually keep the thing under control for extended periods of time. And 2 or 3 are gone. Actually, 3 or 4 are gone. So that's an amazing piece of work to get that thing home. So is it dense dispersion? Is that enough to prove Patriot? Probably not. Can we identify differences between warheads? Well, actually, we can, because this is the Book Warhead and this is the Patriot. As a matter of fact, as far as I know, this is a Block 2 Patriot. So we're starting to get really specific. You can see here that the fragments, and over here, they end up angular and square. You see that? And over here, these are where the fragments get dispersed. They are round. So essentially, what we're looking for is a square peg in a round hole. And what do we find? Well, have a look at this. These are all the instances where I could find round holes. Now, my cutoff was admittedly not that great, but basically this hole here is the most irregular that I used. The rest of them, pretty much pinhole perfect. And the most important thing that I reckon, the further to the front of the plane that you get, the more round the holes become. So what you're seeing here is a dispersion pattern. If it exploded in front of it, then the further back you get, the more deformed or the more wobbly the fragments get, making worse and worse holes. But this pattern here, I've zoomed in, is amazing. It's like a shotgun, like perfectly round holes all the way through. So you can see all of these round holes. That's amazing. Now, just here, you can see that I'm ignoring that and I'm ignoring that because I'm pretty certain that if you tear a bit of aluminium and put it in a 400-mile-an-hour wind, that's going to happen. So, there's a little bit of doubt associated with all of this. So what can we assume from that? Well, it was Patriot, basically. Probably a Block 2. And we can even guess the tactics, because basically what we think they did was they fired the missiles and then they ran for the hills. Did I mention it was Patriot? Yes, it's definitely Patriot. My comments are a surprise to you, but Russian propaganda has lied. Finally, I'm going to say a thank you to Ukraine. And there is a good reason for that. You probably didn't realize at the time, Ukraine, but you have avenged the deaths of 298 innocent civilians, more than the civilians of your own country. Civilians who are in no way associated with this war. I have no right to represent these families, but as an Australian, well done, Ukraine, and thank you. And I think we're going to end this not with my traditional outro, but just with some silence.